A long time ago, I wanted to be the boy actress.
Wanted to be a boy actress? Oh, a voice
Actress. So
actor, a voice actor.
basically, you can.
Like in Vietnam? Or you wanted to like do dub-ins for like old ninja movies?
No, I translate. Basically, they give me a translate from a Chinese, Hong Kong to Vietnam, so I can make the sound from the old person and then.
Oh, okay, but you would be speaking Vietnamese. Okay, I got you. All right. The one thing we need to do that I forgot to finish up last time. Remember, I told you that this next part's going to be really, 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 really important. So pay attention to this part. All right. So I came in and I clicked on. So I'll go back and do it again. So I came into Firebase. I clicked on database. Then I clicked on real-time database. I clicked getting started. The first time you do this, it's going to open up, and the default is start in locked mode. But if you start in test mode, so go ahead and click that, it turns everything to true. So it says anyone with your database reference will be able to read or write to your database. That's okay. That's what you want to have it set to for the hackathon. That way your app can talk to the database without having a user authenticated. So when you first go in here, I'll do this again. You're in your project under develop. So if it's not already opened, click on develop, click on database, click on get started under real-time database, and click start in test mode, and then click enable. All right, now it's giving us this little warning saying, just so you know, your security rules are defined as public. Anyone can read or write to your database. Yes, I'm aware. So we'll just dismiss that and move on with life. This is what our database looks like right now. It's completely empty. Okay? All right, so now we're going to go back and I'm going to switch over to a different, so here's our hackathon sample. So this is what the database looks like when there's stuff in there. And we're gonna talk about these. So I'm actually gonna dump this. I'm gonna empty this database out here. And then we're gonna walk through the example from that I put up. It's already up on Slack, but it can be a bit difficult to follow. All right, so in this project, I have already done that thing where it's connected to Firebase, those things. But keep in mind, when you download the project, it's connected to my Firebase. So not connected to your database or something like that. So you probably want to create your own project like we did. We had our own project in here, and then use this code as a reference and bring it in. So I'm going to explain how the code here works. All right, first thing. We're going to be writing to this database in this example, user objects and message objects. Okay, two different types of objects. So let's just go look at my user and my message object first. So here's my user object. Forget about this ignore extra properties. You can actually remove that. It doesn't hurt anything. That's just part of the Firebase documentation, so don't let that bug you. This is a normal public class. We have normal fields, just like any other class, right? We have to have a constructor that takes no parameters. That's a requirement, and I'll explain why in a little bit. Then we can write our own constructor that does something real. I wrote this function called the display just for testing. That's not required. The one required method is this toMap method. Okay, so let me explain this. So this guy is actually a hash map. Now, Firebase knows how to store, everything's transferred in JSON. So it knows how to store things in name value pairs. So if I'm thinking about a user has a first name, a last name, and an age, right? If we look up in my fields here, I have a for F name, an L name, and an age. So my Java object holds those three fields, just like our Java object for a user would hold anyways. So really all we've added here to make this work for Firebase is we've added this function that returns a name value pair, a map that's a name value pair. The function has to be called toMap. And all it does is it creates a brand new hash map and sets a variable name fname equal to whatever my fname variable is equal to, a variable name lname equal to whatever my lname variable is equal to, so on and so forth. This guy must match the field name. Okay? So when I say toMap on my object, it's going to give me a hash map with three name value pairs in this case. And it's that hash map that gets sent to Firebase to get stored. Make sense? Similarly, when it comes back to the app from Firebase, it's going to come down as that hash map, and then that hash map will be used to rebuild this object. All right, so there's two important things to point out here. So one is you have to have this toMap thing included in your objects that you want to be compatible with storing on Firebase. All right, so this has everything to do with storing stuff on Firebase. Secondly, if you want to be able to read your objects back in from Firebase, your fields must be public. Okay? So other than those two things, this looks like a normal Java object, right? Nothing special about it. You just happen to make your fields public, and then you've thrown in this function called toMap that just returns all your name value pairs from your fields as a hash map for some reason. Okay? Other than that, this guy is a normal plain Jane class. Nothing special about it. Same thing for message. Message is going to hold two variables. Both of them public. Fields must be public. It has to have that no argument constructor, and I'll show you where that's going to be used. It needs it in order for this to work. Then you should probably have your own constructor if you intend to build these objects and then tell Firebase to store your object. But this is not required. I mean, if you want to build a message using the default constructor and then just set your public variables equal to what you want, that's fine. That's what Firebase does when it comes back in. Okay, Firebase creates a generic message and then sets the title field equal to whatever the title in the hash map is equal to. And it sets the body field equal to whatever the body tag was in the hash map. Okay, so it sets that up that way rather than calling your constructor. So it calls this constructor and then calls this field separately and this field separately to fill it in with data. And then there's our toMap on this one. Just returns a hash map that has, in this case, two name value pairs. Make sense? Okay, so now let's go back to main activity. So all the logic for this guy right now is just inside of onCreate. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to just look at this top part, and then we're going to skip to the bottom part, and then we'll come back to the stuff in the middle. So this first guy here, Firebase Database, I'm creating a variable named database. It's of type Firebase Database, which comes from this Google Firebase Database library. This is something that was brought in for us when we did updated our Gradle thing. And that guy is going to be equal to Firebase Database.getInstance. This dude will give us the instance to our actual Firebase database because of the way we set up Android Studio to work with Firebase for this project. Make sense? So it knows to give us our actual database. So let's give us as a pointer to the actual database. Then I want to create two separate references. So I'm going to go to my database. I'm going to say get reference. And maybe it's easiest right now to think of these as folders. So think of this as a folder called messages. So from my database, I want to create a folder named messages. Similarly, I want to create a folder called users. And go ahead and give me a reference to that folder so I can put stuff into those folders. That make sense? So that's what we're doing here. So we're getting the database, and then we're using that database to get a reference for a folder that lives in there. All right. Now, I'm going to skip this stuff for a second, then we'll come back to it. Everything we're doing down here is about filling the database up with stuff. Okay? Both of these loops do the same thing. This is filling up messages. This is filling up users. So if we just look at messages here, I'm going to create 10 things. Now, we are using this function here called push. And what push does is it creates a unique identifier. So I'm going to create a new database reference that's going to start off as my reference to the message folder. But then when I say that .push, this is going to put a uniquely named folder inside of messages. So I'm going to have a folder with a crazy name that's unique from any other folder. Okay, so this would be an entry. So messages will hold a whole bunch of unique named folders, and inside those folders will be our actual message contents. Okay, so when I say message ref.push, this will give me a unique reference to a unique folder inside of the messages folder. Then I'm going to create my brand new message object. This is just normal Java, just creating a message, right? Nothing special about that. That doesn't even have to have anything to do with Firebase. I'm just creating a message object. Now, I'm using my database reference here, temp message, to set the value. So I'm going to put into that unique folder that was created here the value MSG. Now I promise you what's getting called here is MSG.toMap. That's what it's actually calling. It just doesn't require you to type in the toMap. It's doing it for you because it made us make a toMap. Okay? So that's getting the hash map version of our object so that it can store it up in the database. Down here, exact same thing. We're going through. We're creating a unique folder inside of our users. We're creating a normal user object. Then we're setting the value to that user object. Notice that I'm using a random object here because I'm setting the age of our user to some random number between, I guess this would be 7 and 21. Just randomizing the age for our users. Otherwise, I'm saying first name 0, last name 0, first name 1, last name 1, so on and so forth. Very generic data. All right, so this is how we write stuff to our database. So I'm going to go ahead and we'll stop this. And I'm going to go ahead and run this guy. Now notice right now my database is empty here, right? Go ahead and run this guy. Now my database has stuff in it. So here's my messages folder. Notice I have a whole bunch of uniquely named folders inside of here. Each of those folders will contain the contents of toMap for each of those things. So there's body 0, title 0, body 1, title 1, so on and so forth. For users, I have uniquely named folders. This was the result of .push, .push, .push. And inside here I have my users. Make sense? All right, so now that I have stuff in my database, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to comment that part of this out for a second. And I'm going to go ahead and run this again real quick. I just want to make sure this does what I believe it's going to do before I try to explain it.
The VR is going to be uploading to Firebase as well?
No.
No, okay.
Yeah, so this is not going to apply to the VR projects. Oh, that's why I have a search thing in there. Like, why isn't anything showing up? All right, so notice that when I first connected, it showed me all the stuff in the database. I'm going to show you why it showed me all that stuff. Okay? My database has not gotten any larger. So let's go and look at this stuff up here, because this is the example of how we read. So if we go back to our picture here, I mentioned that this iPad app example, that this guy let the database know that I am interested in knowing when things change in the database. Make sense? Okay, so he's registering for an event from Firebase. So when he first registers for that event, Firebase goes ahead and dumps the current thing he was interested in down to him. So he has the most up-to-date information. And then it will let him know those things again when things change. Okay? So just to kind of prove that to you, the last thing we see here is Title 9. I'm going to go into our database here. I'm going to change body 0 to body 100. Well, you saw it scroll down more, so it actually gave us all the data again because something changed in the database. I didn't have to rerun the application or anything. The application was notified by Firebase. All right, so now let's talk about how that happened. So up here, we created our message ref and our users ref. This is just our kind of our pointer to the messages or to the users folder, if we want to think about them as folders. Now I'm going to use that message ref to add a value event listener. Okay? Now a value event listener is a listener associated with values in the database. Okay? Now this guy is going to be a brand new. Now we could create our own class if we wanted to that was a value event listener class. We could then create an instance of that class and set add value event listener equal to that instance if we wanted to. But what we're doing here is we're kind of creating this listener on the fly. So message ref, add event listener, and what goes in here, that's the value being passed to that function. Let me move that out of the way.
In other words, the listener is the folder is becoming listened to.
Yeah, I'm going to finish explaining that part. But for right now, everything I have highlighted there, that is the parameter to the add value event listener function. Make sense? Now, I'm using the new keyword here. The new keyword is what I use to build a new instance of something, right? So if right before this, if I said string s is equal to new string hello, something like that. This new string hello, doesn't that look a lot like this value listener thingy here? So I'm creating an instance. Now, value event listener is actually something that's called an interface. What I'm doing is right here, I'm actually defining that interface in line. Does anybody know what that's called when you have a function that takes an implementation in as a parameter? We could really say it takes another function as a parameter. What's that kind of, what's type of parameter is this? There's a generic name for this, and then you might use the JavaScript name as well. Anybody know? When a function takes another function as a parameter. JavaScript, they're called callbacks. Yep. So what is the generic computer science term for this type of thing? For the ability for a function to take another function as a parameter. Starts with a C. CL. Starts with a CL. CLO. Okay, we're playing Hangman. CLOS. It is closure. Yeah, it's called a closure. Okay, a closure. Closure is the computer science theory term for a function that takes a function as a parameter. All right. So this is my closure implementation here. So what I'm doing is this value event listener. We just go look this up here real quick. I might even have it in one of these screens. I don't. All right. So this guy is a public interface called value event listener. And it has two parameters. One is on canceled. So this method will be triggered in the event that the listener either failed at the server or is removed as a result of the security and Firebase rules. So this onCancel thing, if we go back to our picture here, this app requested for Firebase to send him any inputs. OnCanceled means that Firebase lets him know that you are no longer being notified of inputs for whatever reason. Might be that Firebase has been rebooted. Might be that maybe this person's session is timed out, whatever it is. For some reason, Firebase will call that method OnCanceled whenever the connection's been disabled. The other method that we have to write is onDataChange. And this guy will receive as a parameter a data snapshot of the current state of the database. Okay? Well, current state of the database from the perspective of that reference. So right now we're looking at it from a messages folder perspective or from a users folder perspective. It won't give us a dump of the entire database. It'll give us only a dump of the reference that we're operating off of. So we can actually create listeners for different portions of the database. Maybe we don't care about nine folders, but one of them we want to know when stuff changes. Something like that. So we can set up the reference on a specific folder. We can even set up references on specific children in a folder. We could say, I only actually care. Oh, I haven't run it again since that thing was there, but here we go. I only actually care about this very specific thing. So I can actually make a reference that is this guy specifically, and then set the event listener up for him. Make sense? I can also set an event listener up at messages, but I can set a child event listener where I actually want to be notified when only a single child has changed and just give me the modification. I find from using Firebase, and this probably isn't the most efficient use of it, that it's easiest for me to work with Firebase for it to always give me the full dump of the thing I was interested in. So I make it granular by making my references dive down to where I am, but I'd rather rely on always getting a rehash of the folder that I was looking at. That way I can always use the pattern of, let's say I'm dealing with a view group that I want to remove views from. I can always say remove all, then take my data snapshot and put it all back. And that should always be up to date. That make sense? That is probably not necessarily the intended pattern from Firebase. I pretty much use that for everything because I'd rather program the stuff myself than have to re-remind myself how Firebase works each time I use it, because some of those other functions, the data snapshot, like right now, it gives me everything in that folder. But when you say I only want to be notified when a child is updated, it only gives you the one thing that was updated, nothing else. So you kind of have to react differently to that. I'd rather just react to the whole data and just reprocess it. Okay, so in any case, if we are implementing this interface, value event listener, we are forced to write these two functions, onDataChange and onCanceled. You will see here in our Android Studio, here's my onDataChange, here's my onCancel. Make sense? So I've implemented them in line as part of this closure to the parameter of the add value event listener. So this is a little bit, let's call it wonky. In fact, we'll write this a little bit different way here in a few minutes, just so you can see maybe let's call it a cleaner version of it. All right. But for right now, when onDataChange, this guy's receiving a snapshot. So data snapshot is effectively the JSON dump of the current data reference, the folder that you're referencing. So I'm going ahead and I'm printing out, that'll give me the JSON of it. So you can kind of see that this is JSON data. It's passing back and forth. And here, let me scroll up here actually. So here's that JSON data right here. So this is messages, and here's all the values that are in messages. So here's a folder name. The value of that folder is a JSON element. It has two things in it, body and title. Here's another folder. The value of that is a JSON, body and title, so on and so forth. All right, so that's standard JSON stuff. Okay, so that's what this line printed out. Now the next line here, this for data snapshot child in data snapshot get children. If we look at this data snapshot here, this is my messages folder, and the value of this guy is a collection of name value pairs, a collection of children, where each children has a key that is the unique folder name, and then has a value that is the JSON equivalent of a message. So there is the value associated with the key that is this unique folder name. Okay, so when I say data snapshot get children, it's getting me the contents of this list. It's the list of name value pairs that are associated with unique folders and the JSON elements associated with them. So each time through this for each loop, child will be equal to, for instance, the very first time through, child is that guy, what I have highlighted there. The second time through, child is that guy. So on and so forth. All right. And what am I doing? I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get the value from my child. And I'm telling it the value I want to get is message.class. So this piece right here, this is the guy that requires this no argument constructor and also requires these guys be public. Because what's actually happening there is when I say I'm going to get the value message.class, it is creating an empty message for me. So if this is creating a message temp is equal to new message like that. Then it's saying temp dot body is equal to, some body text. Temp dot title is equal to some title text. That's what it's doing to build for me this message. Okay? When I sent it out, when I wrote it to Firebase, it called my objects to map to get it into the JSON format to ship it up there. When it came back down, I have it in JSON format. Now I need to piece those pieces back out, and Firebase does that for me by first utilizing my no argument constructor to create a blank message and then writing the public elements, the public fields to it. Make sense? But from our perspective, as just the programmer who's using this tool, I'm just saying, I'm going to create a variable called value of type message. Go ahead and grab me the message associated with the current child. And it does the magic of building that object for you. And then to prove that that object had real stuff in it, I'm saying value.display. I'm calling that function that I wrote inside of message down here, which just prints some crap out. That's just a normal display method. It has nothing to do with Firebase. This is just me printing out the fields, proving they got added. Make sense? All right. All right, and we see, here's an example of the output from message. So we see that that display is working. What I've highlighted down here. All right, so, and then my on cancel, I'm just printing out failed to read value, something bad happened, blah, blah, blah. Whatever, just normal error checking stuff. Secondarily, I'm doing the exact same thing, but instead of this being in terms of my message reference, I'm doing it in terms of my user reference. So this guy is getting notified whenever stuff changes in my user folder. Okay? But the rest of the stuff in here is the same. Does that make sense? All right, so now one thing we could do.
We have API to stop that.
Yeah, we do. So we can say, I'm not actually stopping the listener right now, but you would say this. I think it's remove event listener. So for this, you'd have to know the name of the event listener you want to remove, but there is one that allows you to remove all event listeners. At least I thought there was. Looks like maybe not. So I would have had to store the event listener. If I intended on removing it, I would have had, actually, does remove value do this? Let me just look up database reference here. Yeah, they're saying they're currently, well, this is a while ago. Yeah, it looks like you'd have to store those listeners somewhere in order to remove it, or just like garbage collection, handle it. That is interesting though, because you would think that
There may be scenario where we want to stop the listener in our program. On some conditions, we can.
yeah, well, right. Because a lot of times what will happen is when you leave a screen to go to a different screen, you'll go ahead and pause all events on that screen. That way it's not still listening. So, I mean, the nice thing with this is that screen will update when you're not on that screen, which is good if you wanted it to continue to update. But if you really wanted it to not be using network and stuff like that, I mean, this could get kind of bad on Android, I would think, actually. If an app was put in the background, you forgot about it, right? Okay, it was put in the background, and you were just on some screen that was receiving updates from the database. And let's just say that whoever wrote it was hitting some gigantic, the reference was like the top level of the database. So every single time the database changed, it was downloading like 3 megabytes of data or something like that. And let's say that the data is changing every 3 seconds. So you're going to go over your data limit pretty quick just because of this stupid app running in the background. Yeah, so a good programmer then would want to create those instances, store them, so they could zip through and remove all of them. And we can actually look at that example because that's going to be compatible with what I was going to do next anyways. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to actually create a class. Get rid of this guy here. I'm going to create a class that implements value event listener. Okay, so I'll go in here. I'm going to create a brand new class. So so a lot of people who maybe haven't written a lot of Java code that looks like this can sometimes look kind of intimidating when you have all this crap kind of embedded. I think it looks sloppy as well, but it is convenient. Because I mean, really, there isn't that much logic here, right? So for something this size, you might say, I don't know if it's really worth going and creating a whole separate class to put this stuff in there when I can just put it all right here, right? But if you wanted your code to look a little cleaner, let's go ahead and let's write the version of this. So we're going to call this message value event listener, or let's call it message listener. So I'm going to create a new Java class. We're going to call this guy message listener. So 1N. Okay. And we're going to say that this guy implements. Oh, sorry. Thought I had the other thing copied. All right, this guy implements value event listener, like this. Now, if you hover over this, notice he's going to say, this guy must either declare, blah, 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 so all these things. And I think I should be able to right-click. Is it going to give me a fix? Well, that sucks. I would have, oh, maybe this guy? Yeah, implement methods. So it's going to implement both of those methods for me. There we go. So now I can just fill those guys in. So what I'll do is I'm going to come out here. I'm going to steal the same code I had. So I'm going to go into main activity. Here's my logic for our on data change for messages. And then here's my logic for on canceled for messages. Oh, it's not called, it's called database error here instead of error. I could just rename it up there or just change this. That's fine. Okay, so that's it, like that. So now what I can do is inside of main activity here, I'm going to go ahead and just for comparison, I'm going to comment this out. And above it, I'm going to say, well, I'm going to go ahead and say message list is equal, oh, I need to create a, it's going to be a message listener, name message list is equal to a new message listener. And then I'm going to say message ref dot add value listener message list. So, and I actually only needed one line if I didn't want to store this guy so I could cancel it later. So which looks cleaner to you? That or that? Yeah, this looks a lot nicer, right? Now, one of the things in object-oriented programming, one of our concepts is data encapsulation, right? You know, so hide the details behind the scenes. All this detail here is just sitting right in here, right? It's still there. I just happen to have encapsulated it inside of a class that implements the value event listener. You know, so I've written those couple of functions. So then out here in main activity, I just created an instance of my guy and then passed it into this thing. Okay, so I'll go ahead and launch this. So now the message code is going to be based on my secondary class. All right, so we see the same stuff printed out. All right, so you can kind of choose your poison, which makes more sense to you. I probably like this model better. The real reason I went with the model that I provided for the starter project is because most of the online documentation you'll find sets listeners up this way. And I just think it looks kind of messy. But once you've gotten used to reading code, does everybody at least appreciate that these two things say the same thing, right? We've just thrown it in this little Tupperware container over here and we'll say, like, I'll just refer to you when I need you, rather than just dumping it all out in main here and working with it. Okay. All right. Questions about any of that? So it kind of makes sense how the reading and writing from Firebase works. It's pretty cool to be able to read and write full objects, isn't it? Now we do have some limitations though. So let's look at something here. I'm gonna go back a couple. Well, here, let me just do Firebase read data, because this will take me to where I want to go. Because we are limited to what kinds of values we can store. All right, but good news is we can always fall back to a hash map. Okay, so let's see, where is... Now you could use, for those of you who are doing VR stuff, you could use this with Unity. So the tool you're going to be using for VR stuff is with Unity, and you can set up Firebase to use that. Okay, so let's see. Maybe introduction has it in here. I just want to find the list of the types that it's capable of holding. It is in here somewhere. Let's see if it's maybe in Get Started. Yeah, here we go. So types that correspond to available JSON types. We have strings, longs, doubles, booleans, map, and also lists of objects. But these objects must adhere to all those other things, right? So, you know, it's so this becomes a little bit interesting. If we think back to our assembler, assuming we're going to have programs with multiple lines of code in it, we're going to be storing lists of what? Probably strings. Each line is a string. And we've already seen that we can store strings inside of Firebase. So we could not create an array of strings, because arrays cannot be stored in Firebase. But we can create a list. We can create a linked list, because a linked list is an implementation of list. But we can create a list and put strings in there, and it will automatically serialize to the correct type of thing to go up there. That make sense? All right, so now if we want to see that in action, let's go ahead into user, and let's say public linked list of strings. And we're going to call this guy actually, technically, we could have a linked list of messages associated with a user. That might be a better use of our things here. So I'm going to create a linked list of messages we'll call this guy messages. And then when we construct our user, we'll go ahead and we're going to say this dot messages is equal to a new linked list of message objects. And then I'll say for int I is equal to 0, I is less than 10, I plus plus. We're going to go ahead and say this dot messages dot add new message. And the message we're going to add is going to be, we need to give this guy a title and a body. So we'll say title plus I, body plus I. We'll add that to our list. Now we do need to then, since we've created another field here, which I've made a public field, I then need to go ahead and include that in my map, my to map. So I'll say result.put messages is going to be this dot messages. That makes sense? So every single time I create a brand new user, I'm just going to go ahead and fill up his linked list of messages with 10 messages. Make them feel important. All right. Now, before we go on here, just so we're not destroying our data, I'm just going to go ahead and delete messages and users. Because no longer are we going to have a specific messages thing. Now we're going to have users where each user has messages. Make sense? All right, so back in main activity, it's a shame we didn't write our user listener for this instead of that. So I'm going to take off this listener for messages. We still have our user listener though. Now when we write, actually I still wanted that, but I'll stop it here. So now we're just going to create users, but when we create a new user, it's going to generate messages for us. All right, so I'll go ahead and run this. This should now refill our database up with messages nested inside of users. Row. Oh, it must want an array list, not a linked list. Go back into user. Change that guy to an array list. Okay, let's make sure that our database didn't get like partially written to. It actually did. Yeah, so see, it got some messages in there. It's actually, it wrote correctly. It was reading it back in where it failed. Yeah, so it was able to write our linked list, but on the way back in, it delivered it to us as an array list. So that was the problem. We're fine using the linked list as long as we're going to convert our array, the array list to a linked list on the way back out. Might as well just use an array list to begin with. Okay, so let me run this again. I think it'll work on the way in and the way out now. Okay, yep, that seems better. Although my display is not showing the messages associated with it. It certainly could. It's not a major issue. But now we see, here's my users, here's all these unique users, here's this user has his age and stuff, and here's the messages that he received. And notice it just went ahead and uniquely numbered my messages based on what bucket they were in the array list. Make some sense? Okay. So Firebase, not too bad to use. Makes some reasonable sense. Okay. So now let's go back into our program here. I'm just going to, well, let's just put that behind this one. So let's reimagine our Android app a little bit. Take a sip of water here. You know, I have to drink 4 of these per day. My dietitian says you're supposed to drink at least half, if you're trying to lose weight, at least half of your body weight in ounces of water.
Really?
So I have to basically drink 200 ounces of water a day. Huh? How am I doing? I've lost 27 pounds.
A month?
In a month.
Wow, that's good.
Wow.
That's really good.
See, before you know it, I'm going to be skinnier than you. I probably would be healthy. How much do you weigh?
185.
Yeah, I wouldn't be a healthy weight for me. What's this? 27 pounds in the last 4 weeks.
That's good.
Because of water that you are.
Yeah, I don't eat any food. I just drink water. No, I use this app called MyFitnessPal that you put in, because the dietitian I'm working with has me, counting calories. So you put in what your starting weight is, you put in what your goal weight is, and then you get to choose how much you want to lose per week. It recommends 1 pound per week, but you can put in up to 2 pounds. So I put 2 pounds per week. So I get 2,800 calories a day. That's like quite a few calories.
Yeah, that's good meal.
Yeah. So the real trick for me has been those times where I was like, I start feeling hungry and I might like zip through McDonald's and have like 2 double quarter pounders with cheese in 5 minutes and eat basically 4,000 calories in no time. Now I have my own like little snack bag, like I'm an infant. So I have like granola bars in there and I have these little protein shakes. So when I want a little snack, I have one of those that holds me for 2 hours or something. And that's 160 calories. So, yeah. So most of the day, I'm doing those types of things. I'm just grabbing the convenience snack or something because I have it with me. And then, what I've been finding is at night, I have all these extra calories. Like half the time when I get home at night, I have 2,000 calories left over for dinner. I can't even spend them. I can't eat enough. This is the first time I've ever had it. Yeah, it is awesome. And then what was nice about it is, what's nice about this compared to previous diets I've been on, because I've been successful on diets before, like low carb diets, where I've lost a lot. But the problem with the low carb diet is if you cheat once, like cheat one time, you set yourself back 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Because the way low carb works is to put your body into ketosis. So it's burning fat. Well, if you eat a whole bunch of carbohydrates in one meal, the body's no longer in ketosis. What's nice about this is I can eat whatever I want. I just am limited on calories. So I have to choose where I want those calories to come from. Well, what's nice is like we went to the wedding. I ate at the wedding, right? Yeah. So yeah, I'm looking for the homemade Italian tomorrow. But the thing is that I can go to those things, and actually I haven't really been going over calories when there's like special events either. But like on Easter Sunday, I was over calories.
Yeah.
Because Easter Sunday, not only did I eat a lot, I drank 3 bottles of wine myself.
Nice.
But
That's
yeah,
impressive.
but the point is, it didn't matter. The next day, I just pick up where I left off, and I basically had 10,000 calories banked going into that Easter Sunday meal, so I was fine.
Yeah.
But it didn't hurt me.
Yeah.
I could just pick up where I left off the next day and move on with life. So I was able to have fun with my friends.
Right, and even if like on one day if you've taken like a crazy amount of calories, your body can't absorb all those.
Yeah, you'll just get sick. Yeah, you'll end up making yourself sick.
Yeah, so it doesn't even count.
Do we have to work out with that app?
You don't have to. You can add exercise to it. So my main exercise is going to be, my golf simulator at home, or when the course is open, I go out and I golf every day. So, that I expect, because I was saying at the break, the country club opened today.
Oh, it did?
Yeah, which is kind of funny since the weather is going to be crappy for the next 4 days. But today was the official opening day for River Club. So private courses open late, because they don't want to damage the grass and stuff.
Did you go?
I didn't go today. I didn't see the email as I was like making fun of Van for not checking his email. I didn't see the email, but my wife saw it 2 days ago when they announced it. And I didn't see it till this afternoon, about an hour before I was supposed to meet a buddy at the movies.
I was gonna say, how was that movie too?
It was good. We saw what did we see? We saw Blockers today. That was good. But the good news is now that the course is officially open, any day that I decide it's worthwhile braving it, I can go out.
Gotcha.
You just bundle.
Yeah.
But I think within a couple of weeks, things are going to start being, it looks like we're starting to hit 40s most days and
Next week's like 45.
upper 40s, mid 40s. So now you're getting into the range of moving in the right direction. Yeah.
Terrible outside.
Okay. So what I want to do here, well, I guess let's think about this for a second. I'm going to go ahead and relaunch this app. Because what we ultimately want to do is probably allow ourselves to have multiple lines of code, but also allow ourselves to, this is the right app. Because right now when I run this, I then go to RAM. I can look at RAM. I can go to registers. Now, actually, I think that the way our code is currently working, let's look at the run button here. So we're getting the instruction from input text. We're printing out that instruction to the screen, just proving that we got it. Then we're starting, this is where we parse out the opcode and stuff like that. So really, all this code down here so I'm going to take all this code I'm going to take it out of there, and I'm going to create a private void execute instruction. And this guy will take in an instruction as a parameter. And then I'll paste all that code in there. So now whenever we want to execute an instruction, we will call execute instruction, which then allows us to have multiple instructions. Make sense? All right. So I'll go ahead and say this dot execute instruction. Make sure this guy still works. We did do a toast. What I think I'm going to do here is rather than toast the opcode, we're just going to say instructions complete. That way it's a little bit more generic. All right, because what we'll end up doing in here is we're going to end up changing this guy. Instead of an input edit text, we'll change it to a multi-line thing where they can type multiple things in there, and then we'll just go through it line by line, calling this over and over again. Okay, but let's just make sure we didn't break anything, and then we can take another quick break. And I'll go to registers, and X5 has stuff in it. Okay. Just real quick, we'll just give ourselves a decent starting place. I'm going to go to activity main here. I'll minimize this. We want to be able to type in multiple lines here. What widget do we have that will allow us to have multiple lines? Or will this guy just do it? So I can set the gravity of this guy to top.
Is it going to execute multiple statements?
It won't right now, but we'll make it do that. Okay, so we're going to set the gravity to top. And maybe left. Oh, I think I have the text attributes on that set. Well, let's see here. I want to see if it'll let me actually put in multiple lines. It doesn't look like I could do it in this. So we might need to use a text box for adding a line and then add it to a container, which would work fine. My concern, though, is how do you get it to remove?
You take one of those out.
Yeah. Let's say you've added 5 lines to your container. You decide, oh, I want this line to be different. So you want to either edit that line or you want to remove that line.
You mean so like you type in something and it uploads it?
Yeah, so I would like have this single text box here and then the thing below it. I type in something, I would hit a button that says add. And it would kind of push it onto the stack or, you know, or add it to the bottom of this list, something like that. You know, but to remove a line, you don't want to have to pop 4 times and you've lost 3 instructions. You want to be able to tell one guy. But at least initially, we can just put 3 things on there and just don't screw up, right? Okay, so we'll do that. So let's take about 10. We'll come back. We'll make this guy a vertical linear layout with a scroll view with a single thing on top. That might work out better anyways, rather than us having to like freeform type. So we'll do that. So let's take 10.